You're live.
And not only that, they started looking at how we're going to do the cabbage. There's a fire right in the middle.
He stacks it up like
And I had
pyramid.
6 concrete slabs
It's huge.
put out in the floor.
Huge rock.
I staggered those in a hexagon around it. It started looking like a turtle. Right? Is that how it kind of?
I saw the turtle and those little
saw the
scoots
turtle?
of the, I saw the scoots in the slabs.
All right, we're live. The deck is getting broadcast all over the internet. Oh, I wanted to do one quick pan of the lake so everybody could see this beautiful setting where we are. Look at that. And here's all these pranksters assembled in Lowell. No, we're not in Lowell. We're in Oswego. I never even know what town I'm in. So I think that ought to do it.
What's going on in Lowell?
The Kerouac celebrations, which will be referenced shortly. All right. Hello, Internet. Hello, Genie's happy place. And pranksters galore. So here's a little, my favorite American president who was an author, mixed with the pranksters. It was 200 years ago. Our forefathers and pranksters brought forth upon this continent a new idea, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men and women are created equal and playful. Now we're engaged in a great civil party, testing whether that notion or any great notion so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. And we are met on this great deck of genies and have come here to dedicate a portion of this year as a fitting respite from the madness of the madhouse of the nation we find ourselves in. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we could not hallow this scene. The brave men and women who pranked before us have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it will never forget what the pranksters have built here. It is for us, the living, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who first bust painted have thus far so nobly advanced. And it's for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored pranksters we take increased devotion to that cause for which they are still giving the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that Jerry and Jack and Neil and Ken shall not have died in vain, but rather that this prankster land, under all the great spirits, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that movements of the pranksters, by the pranksters, for the pranksters, shall not perish from this earth.
Yeah.
Thanks to Uncle Abe. Right. Oh, yes, you're asking about Lowell. Well, good timing. So yeah, there's gonna it's Kerouac's 100th centennial of his 100th birthday this year, and so they have these massive celebrations, 5 days long, in his hometown of Lowell, Massachusetts. And so this is a little short description of what those events are like. In the spirit of Jack, a spontaneous love ode just flowed to that thing we do in Lowell. What's cool about LCK is everybody's there for Jack, but on our own terms. Everybody has a completely different relationship with their family member. You'll hear 100 different stories, all by people beaming in front of you, not on your phone, in real life. Radiating energy coming from Ohio, Ontario, Virginia, because of On the Road or Maggie Cassidy or Dr. Sachs, because of America or Walt Whitman or Dr. Thompson, because of wanderlust or adventure or doctoral thesis. There's all the guided firsthand tours you want to ride, and historians and scholars next to you wherever you roam, and playful people off the clock just riffing in the beauty of all the assembled happiness. There's nonstop jamming and goofing and hugging interaction. There's a million places to go, both on maps and not. Dr. Sax's woods, the Merrimack's banks, the cobblestone streets and brick building labyrinths. And all the local Lowell Jacksters come out from all their local hidings for the weekend when they can let their freak flag fly. And everybody's got stories. And you hear Jack lines you've read play back in your head as you walk with a crew of your new best friends from one scene to another in places you've only imagined, and some you haven't even. And it goes on for days and days, from the setting sunlit Worthen afternoon of Thursday, leading into the epic bar crawl of Jack joints that climaxes at Cappy's copper kettle of fish, with David Amram riffing Pull My Daisy, until homeboy Bill Walsh's final walking tour on Monday through the secret layers of Pawtucketville, which weaves back to our Worthen clubhouse, where the worthy who made it all the way hoist and toast until the jam is done. It's Jack in the now, not in books, not online, in person, in front of you, right now. Live it or lose it. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to. I have this wild new idea to. I don't know if this is gonna work, but to do this for each book I'm reading. Wouldn't that be funny? It's a new idea. Okay, so I know a bunch of us here are mildly partial to the Grateful Dead.
Only a little.
So here's the way Jerry Garcia remembered his transformation into Jack, as captured in the liner notes for the 1990 Rhino re-release of Kerouac's 3 records. Garcia says, I recall in 1959 hanging out with a friend who had a Kerouac record, and I remember being impressed. I'd read his stuff, but I hadn't heard it. The cadences, the flow, the kind of endlessness of the prose, the way it just poured off the page. It was really stunning to me, his way of perceiving music, the way he wrote about music and America and the road, the romance of the American highway. It struck me. It struck a primal chord. It felt familiar, something I wanted to join in, but it wasn't a club. It was a way of seeing. It became so much a part of me that it's hard to measure. I can't separate who I am now from what I got from Kerouac. That's Jerry talking. I don't know if I ever would have had the courage or the vision to do something outside with my life, or even suspected the possibilities existed if it weren't for Kerouac opening those doors. That's something. That's Jerry. And I wanted to add a little yin to all, or a little yang, no, yin to all the yang. In that, so I became friends with a lot of these people, and including Kerouac's first wife, Edie Parker. And here's a little bit from the Hitchhiker's Guide when I first met all these people. So here's a little portrait of Jack's first wife, who was a super cool woman. Jack's first wife, Edie Parker, was the one I could talk to back then, and in fact would grow to become close friends with shortly after Boulder. She even enlisted me to write her autobiography with her, which seemed like the opportunity of a lifetime, until I learned she'd already scratched out 1,000 pages and wasn't even up to the part where she met Jack. She was absolutely insistent that every detail of every moment of her life be included. And even at my young age, with this huge opportunity before me, I knew this would be an impossible task, and we'd end up fighting over every detailed description of every piece of clothing she ever wore. So I did not end up joining her on that journey, and we stayed friends instead. Uh, where Jan Kerouac and Carolyn Cassidy were shy and quiet, Edie was a ball of fire, telling stories and relishing the spotlight. Where Jan didn't want to go in front of a microphone, Edie would eat them up, like the 6 sauerkraut hot dogs she ate the first time she met Jack, the story of which she probably told 60,000 times over that week. She was a hoot, a bona fide character, a real pisser, as they called people like her back in the day, a dynamite broad, a catalytic woman, gregarious, a natural chatterbox, a female Neil in her confidence and making the party jump wherever she went. This gathering in Boulder was the first time Edie'd ever appeared anywhere to talk about Jack. But then that was the case for a lot of these people, this being the first major summit and all. But she knew Jack before anyone else who was here, having met him when they were both teenagers in 1939 and falling in love not long after. In fact, she had this whole thing she called the 40s gang, which was just her, Alan, Burroughs, and Hunky, were the core four who predated everybody. Neil, Carolyn, Holmes, Corso, Ferlinghetti, they all came years of youth later. You remember who your oldest first, who dates back the furthest. Edie, acutely aware of who the original group was, and she may be connecting with each of them, but especially with Hunky, who, for whatever reason, seemed to dig the most. But then he would have been my first pick too. First came Edie, who introduced her brainy boyfriend Jack to this cool guy from her Columbia art class, Lucian Carr, who in turn introduced Jack to his life-altering partners in crime, Allen Ginsberg and Bill Burroughs, making it pretty easy to peg the Beat Generation's inception to Edie's introduction and the all-night drinking, talking, and phonograph playing sessions they danced across the universe in the 4 rooms of the Morningside Heights apartment that she shared with Lucian's girlfriend, and then later with Joan Vollmer Adams, who would marry Burroughs. As much as Jack and the Beats were products and practitioners of the male-centric world of the 1940s and 50s, it was almost comically common for the women to be the real catalysts of the creation. It was Jack's mother who gave her grown-up son the love and shelter and stability to write and preserve his manuscripts. It was his last wife, Stella, who mothered him after Mamere had a stroke and was keeping his filing cabinets and archives intact after they both passed away. It was Ann Charters who was the first scholar to take him seriously, and while he was still alive, showing up on his doorstep in 1966 to begin the work that would become his first biography. It was his second wife, Joan Haverty, who had the job that paid the rent on the apartment at 454 West 20th Street that gave Jack the space to write his career-changing scroll of On the Road in that 20-day shot in 1951. It was Carolyn who first moved to San Francisco in 1947, long before Ferlinghetti or any of them, and that's why Neil went there, followed by Jack, Alan, and the domino tumble of history. And it was one wild, fun-loving woman named Frankie Edie Parker from Grosse Pointe, Michigan, who chose to room with a like-spirited woman who would become Mrs. Burroughs, just as she'd be Mrs. Jack, who together hosted the rented Eden from which the entire Beat Generation spawned. There's Edie Kerouac for you. Thank you. Okay. This is my new experiment. I don't know.
Wow. That's a pretty good rundown.
Cool. Okay, what am I doing now?
Central City 75.
I guess we're doing this.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh yeah, right. So I also did the most recent book is this political one. The political adventures in politics, 1980 to 2020. So it's got stories going right back to 80, and then it climaxes with the New Hampshire primaries this past election cycle in February and 2020, and it's up in New Hampshire, and so. There was this one moment where Jack just sort of came into the space, and it was this climax of the last night of the primary, and it's kind of fun. Then the most extraordinary thing happened when it was over. As the thousands of kids, when it was over, the climactic night, Bernie Sanders had this rally in our hockey arena. It was sold out with like 7,000 kids and at a college, and all these rock bands played, and AOC was there and all this stuff. So it was this huge like Woodstock of the thing with thousands of kids. So as the thousands of kids streamed out of the arena, right next to it was a big outdoor skating pond. And in the joy of the frozen midnight moment in New Hampshire, students began climbing over the fence and figure skating on it without skates. Here were the children of the euphoric night, inspired by a politician to dance the light fandango, waving blue Bernie signs as their batons, running and sliding, cheering and laughing, pirouetting in moonlight, and celebrating their first brush with democracy. Bernie's Rockstar Rally had flashed me back to Gary Hart in 1984, but this was taking me all the way back to my childhood in Winnipeg and going for skates in the early darkness of winter nights on a pond full of happy people in a tranquil town, reveling in the simple pleasures of frozen water. Snowbanks surrounded the ice, and everyone's breath was visible in the cold and misty night. And cheeks were turning rosy, and strangers were hugging strangers in the land where they let the children hug. Democracy had played out for the last week in New Hampshire, and now voters were out playing in the last hours before tomorrow's voting. So I'm a guy who always spots a cool assemblage of friends and wrangles everyone together to get a great group photo. But I didn't know anyone here, and everyone was spread out all over the ice, sort of early social distancing. Then the next amazing thing happened. So you guys know those sprawling group photos taken at center ice when an NHL team wins the Stanley Cup, go all over the place. And you know who Wayne Gretzky is? Well, did you know he invented those? True story. It was when he won his last cup with the Oilers in 1988 at a game at their Edmonton home arena, their fourth cup in 5 years. And after the players, skated around the rink, hoisting the cup above their adrenaline heads, Captain Gretzky grabbed it back and suddenly started waving all the players to center ice to take a group shot with the authentic sweat and victory joy still fresh on their faces. First, it was just the core players, but more and more trainers and coaches and scouts and managers and all the people who made the team work came running out from the benches and sliding into the group. Well, that very scene played out on the frozen pond with this team celebrating the Sanders Cup on home ice. First, about a dozen friends gathered for a group shot. So I ran over in the role of photographer to capture their collective joy, including because there wasn't a single member of the press present. I was it. And as I snapped their hooting faces, more people saw what was happening and came shooshing across the ice and sliding into them in this crazy cartoon of calamity. I had to keep backing up to get their ever-expanding team in the frame. And then more and more student photographers with phones joined my press pool. And this was all that was missing was a big silver cup in the middle. So, in America, when the sun goes down, from first catching Deval Patrick in a small dark basement room in a library, the New Hampshire primary built to a massive open air love-in of screaming, laughing joy. This was democracy in action, in real time in America. From old folks gathered in a gym on a Tuesday afternoon to hear Joe Biden, to thousands of college kids filling an arena and spontaneously creating their own escapades of icecapades, participating in the political process is healthy and thriving. It's not one group or one voice, but a collective of choirs singing songs of joy and progress, of innocence and experience, and forever going further.
Yeah. Music too.
Right on. Okay. The Cassidy book. Oh, hey, I think this is your cue. So we're going to try a little duetty thing here. Oh, right. This is freaking cool. So I was at, we got to get you in the frame. Were you going to be there? Kerouac's On the Road. He wrote it in 3 weeks on a scroll of paper. That I mentioned that about. And so the scroll finally went to auction at Christie's in New York. And I was in the room when it happened. So here's a little account of what it was like to be there when this historic event took place. Just a quick. So at one of these auctions, I've never really been to an auction before, and this is what happens. The bidding increments are all predetermined. Over $1,000, each bid is $100. So if you bid, that's your bid. You can't just pick an amount to bid. Over $5,000, it goes up by $500 with each bid. Over $10,000, it goes up by $1,000 every time. Over $1 million, it goes up by 100,000 increments. When it hits 2 million, it starts going up in $200,000 steps. But by then, it's getting out of my league. Up above the auctioneer is this electronic board that lists the lot number and current bid in US dollars. And below that are lines with each country's equivalent monetary value. So as the auctioneer is zipping up the numerical ladder, all these foreign currency values are flapping by like the train track changing signs at Penn Station. Euros, UK pounds, French francs, Swiss francs, Deutschmarks, yen, lira, and the good old Canadian dollar squeaking in on the bottom line. We exist. Yeah. How many loonies? In fact, in a general sense, there was really one of those we exist feelings in the room. It was the magic zing of the old Jack ring. So the auction's going by lickety split. Lot 249, copy of Ulysses, signed by Joyce himself and by, get this, Matisse. Now, talk about cool autograph collecting, right? Okay, I'll open the bidding at 5,000, 55, 6,000, and 20 seconds later, sold for 13,000, paddle number 319 in the fourth row. It all happens in less than a minute. The big ones take maybe a minute and a half, but lots of stuff's going for under 10 grand. All sorts of little things, no idea what they are. But I kind of felt like bidding just because they're so cheap. It had to be something cool, right? Some Emerson thing or something. But there's a catch. You see, you can't like scratch your nose or anything. Like if you move your arm, you might be bidding. And then of course your nose would get itchy. And so you'd have to sort of turn away from the auctioneer and, like he's the teacher at school and sneak a scratch. So you're watching your moves, watching the crowd, watching these people, watching their catalogs and marking in scores and bidding up to a certain point on lots. And then when their last item of the day is gone, they just immediately get up and leave. Professional buyers, people with money. A set of Oxford dictionaries goes for $850,000. And I bet they're used. An autographed copy of To Kill a Mockingbird goes for $18,000. And I keep wondering, who are these people? And the guy sitting next to Doug Brinkley gets up and steps out for a minute at about lot 270. And he's a big guy wearing this striped suit, like, I don't know what, a 20s gangster, a 40s hipster, I don't know. Big white tie, and a big black shirt, hair greased straight back, almost like a football player, but with a cuff-linked Four Seasons polish and rock and roll swagger. By the time we get to lot 300, there are only 4 gunslingers left on the sideline phone lines as the auctioneers still rattle through numbers like he's unloading on Bonnie and Clyde's car. Rat-a-tat-tatting by the thousands, 9,000, 10,000. My whole life's net worth flashing by in split seconds for some autographed paper. Holy zippers. 15,000, 24,000, 45,000. Fair warning at 45,000. Sold for 45,000. An Edith Wharton letter goes for $800. A bargain. Must have been a crummy letter. Went for a walk. Love Edith. So then comes the finale. Lot number 307. The lot a lot of you have been waiting for. A little auctioneer's humor. Jack Kerouac's original typescript scroll of On the Road, shown here before you on the screens. I'll start the bidding at $650,000. I'm out. 650,000, 700,000, 750,000, 800,000, 850,000, 900,000, 950,000, $1 million over here, $1 million in the front row, $1,100,000. Now there's this first time there's a smidge of a pause. 1,200,000, 1,300,000. And again, now there's a little pause. 1,400,000. Then quickly, 1,500,000. And all this time, it's Brinkley's buddy who's flashing up his white paddle 479 as soon as anyone else bids anything. The old instant paddle flash routine. And then after a pause, the front row finally bids again. 1,600,000. Then quickly, 1,700,000. There's a pause, and then, all right, 1,800,000. Then, boom, 1,900,000. And then there's another, like, kind of extended pause, and it's totally silent in the room, of course. You could hear a dream pop. And the auctioneer, we can wait a little bit. The animated auctioneer aloud. 1,900,000. The bid is 1,900,000 with the gentleman. 1,900,000. Anyone say 2 million? And he looks down at the front row and says, no, I'm sorry, 2 million's the next bid. 1,900,000. 1,900,000 then in the third row at 1,900,000. Is there any further advance at 1,900,000? Fair warning at 1,900,000. And he raises his little wooden gavel stub and slowly starts to bring it down. Last call. And then suddenly, 2 million. And he explains and points to the front row. Whoa. And then instantly, 2,200,000. And the whole crowd whoops. Huge tension release, laughing, clapping, but all the way pinning the needle and then totally quiet again in about 2 seconds, flying by as fast as bebop. Anticipation, says the auctioneer, articulating the air of the collective moment. 2,200,000, 2,200,000 in the third row. Are we all done at 2,200,000? Sold for 2,200,000, and the whole room explodes in applause. Huge release, kabam! And And then just as the applause is dying down, the auctioneer steps up and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to announce that that is a new world record for a literary manuscript at auction." And another round of cheering and whooping. And then as soon as the final clapping dies down, some guy yells, "Corso lives!" All right. Thank you. Thank you, Trisha. A little duet of pranksters. Where are we going next? Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, this is great. All right. This is from, yes, thank you, Trisha. Right. This is where I'm going next, I think. Right. Oh, yes. So this is the Rolling Stone Book of the Beats, which I was involved in and wrote 2 of the keynote essays for. Came out in, I think it was 99. And I want to do this here because it's the power of the collective. And we are all a collective here, gets together and builds a collective, built this place we're in Genie's magic place. And we'll all collaborate together and create works together and support each other. That's kind of the point. So this is a little piece called Floating Universities, about the power of the collective in art. So, masses, your rejection slips, knock down the gates, throw open the bar. Teach me, show me, challenge me, push me, help me win. Athletes have their team, and suits can wear the firm, but making art keeps you home alone, and Genie's happy place is the place you turn. Solo suffering totally blows, so into the sea you dive, searching for souls who swim like you and act at least vaguely alive. With deep sea whales you plunge the depths, with freshwater poets you school, with coral reefers you spark the sea, drinking in dreams from the pool. Out of the one grow many, and out of the many, the one, the it, the aha, the unspoken thing. And from this desire for oneness, togetherness, the artists from the beat poets to the Lilith songwriters have collaborated, cajoled, and consoled each other into movements and generations. The beat generation may never had a single unified voice any more than Generation X does, but their range of harmonies ended up blending into a pretty, inspiring choir. And in this supportive spirit, a loosely defined beat community became a very interdisciplinary affair as they freely mingled with and collaborated with abstract expressionist painters, jazz musicians, living theater actors, playwrights, photographers, cartoonists, dancers, mystics, and poets from other New York schools. In smoking Greenwich Village joints like the Cedar Tavern, the San Remo, and the Artist Club, something more than ideas were being exchanged. We were sharing the holy light, said composer David Amram, Kerouac's principal musical collaborator and the jazz laureate of the generation. The Artist Club was a beautiful get-together run by artists for artists, with talking, philosophy, arguments, and discussions by the hour by serious and brilliant people. And then afterwards, we all go over to the Cedar Tavern and continue the rap. It was like a floating university. Nowhere is this more visually animated than in the 1959 film Pull My Daisy, the single most illuminating beat creation, narrated by Kerouac's best 28 minutes on tape, captured in early cinema verite by evocative still photographer Robert Frank, playfully scored by the classically trained Amram, who also appears as the French hornist Mez McGillicuddy, and starring Allen Ginsberg, Gregory Corso, and Peter Orlovsky as themselves. This Lower East Side home movie is the only existing footage of the Beats in their prime, other than a few scattered TV clips. Co-produced by painter Alfred Leslie and shot in his canvas-filled loft featuring painter Rivers in the role of Neil Cassidy, who was sadly imprisoned in San Quentin at the time, with art dealer Richard Bellamy as the bishop antagonist, and financed by Wall Street libertine painter Walter Gutman. It's a film made by painters about poets, narrated by a novelist. Blessing of community has been felt by artists ranging from the high Renaissance in Florence to the also fairly high poetry Renaissance in San Francisco. Most of the groundbreaking geniuses of Florence, circa 1500, belonged to some regimented guild or patron stable. So many of the artists like Michelangelo, Leonardo, Filippo Lippi, along with architects, storytellers, and would also gather in their own mock confraternities. In one of the more wacky images in art history, picture several of these blazing masters meeting as they did as the Company of the Cauldron for lively drunken dinners around a giant cooking pot in one of their sculpture studios. And they'd begin creating murals, not with paint, but with chicken legs, sausages, cheese, and jelly. Even though their quarrels were nearly as colorful as their art, never has a generation of artists advanced their media so quickly. Hi, I'd like to introduce you to my friend David. In San Francisco in the 1950s, a community of poets began a similarly inspired coffee house collective, meeting and reading the Platonic adage, "To good parties, good men flock unasked." Outlaws from around the nation who gathered in this traditionally liberal port city were starting to notice the same faces on the same stages night after night. And poets like Gary Snyder, Michael McClure, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Robert Duncan, Kenneth Patchen, and Rexroth, assemblage artists like Bruce Conner and Wallace Berman, and filmmakers like Kenneth Anger and Harry Smith, all began enthusiastic crossover interdisciplinary collaborations that was breaking society's bird brain habit of pigeonholing artists. A lush garden had burst into bloom, and it wasn't long before the psychedelic Paisley ran wild. In a sun shower of day-glow paint, Ken Kesey and his merry pranksters had a great notion to take the collective to an even higher level. Incubating in pools of acid on the edge of Stanford University, Kesey was forming an ever-expanding coterie of authors and intellectuals that would eventually compass Neil Cassidy, the Grateful Dead, and Cherry Kool-Aid. As intrepid traveler Ken Babbs put it, the pranksters are a collective of that American spirit that's been passed on from the founding fathers through Melville, Transcendentalism, Whitman, Faulkner, the Beats, and zoom into the pranksters, where it took a wild turn of spontaneity and tribal dance, uninhibited jazz, nonsensical word raps, and any other unfettered reaching for the spirit towards newfound freedoms. A healthy dose of this prankster ethic came from the pranksterish Dadaists, who were trying to overthrow not only the rigidity of the fine arts in the 1910s and 20s, but civilization itself by staging pranks in public places like cathedrals in the middle of a service. This gang of offbeat artists and authors had a collective effect on history rather than simply getting arrested as solo psychos. And that's the great thing. As much as these cool collectives were happening in the recent past, many are thriving today. From communal artists' hearth like the Nuyorican Poets Cafe in New York and the Knitting Factory, to attention-getting rock fests like Lilith Fair and the Tibetan Freedom Concerts, groups of like-minded people are still working together for the collective better. It's good for the soul, for one thing, Cheryl Crow told me of joining the Lilith tour. I mean, it's what religion's based on, that commune, that community, the solace and the friendship of people who have a kindred spirit. Whether it's painting the walls with dinner in Florence or breakfast in bed for 400,000 at Woodstock, coming together stretches the horizon beyond the sum of its parts. And you don't have to be a 500,000 strong. As George Harrison put it of his much smaller group, that was the good thing about being four together. Not like Elvis, you know. I always felt sorry for him later because he was on his own. He had his guys with him, but there was only one Elvis, and nobody else knew what he felt like. But for us, we all shared the experience. Being together counts, even a collective of two. Supporting someone who's supporting you is the seed of a generation. All right, thanks. Okay, so I'm just gonna. That's over. We're done. A quick little ode to Jack, because that's what this is all about. Yes, yes, and tending the gardens.
I gotta get
Okay, this is just like a little 2-minute thing, and it ends the show. So, Jack fights back from off the beaten track, still alive at 100, as if any of us ever wondered if that would happen. Track star sprint through the pages of history, seeing her kneel at the wheel, knocking over grammar cops, blowing past door stops to hidden, darkened jazz joints, puffing on a mez joint, never missing the point of dancing with the mad ones and singing with the sad ones and drinking with the bad ones and skipping past the madhouse and staying clear of the jailhouse, heading for his mum's house to write another epic, soaring like he's manic, catching all the magic of mysteries dark and vast. He channeled spirits to the last. He hitched the roads, had a blast. He wrote it down really fast. Now it's 50 since he's passed. So let's hoist this flag up our mask. Salute the work he amassed. Have you ever seen a cannon so vast? So let us all take a moment to thank the Pollard for the books, the young Prometheans for the camaraderie, the Columbia Cabal for the new vision, Neil Cassidy for the letter, Bill Canastra for the paper, Joan Haverty for the apartment, Malcolm Cowley for the championing, Gilbert Milstein for the reviewing, David Amram for the playing, Allen Ginsberg for the everything, Lowell for the celebrating, you for the being, we for seeing, the golden light of the golden eternity. Thank you, Jack, for all you shone. Thanks. Okay, so there's some Jack buzz for his 100th centennial this year. So read more Jack and support the collectives you're already a part of.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers. Oh, and thanks to you, Internet world, for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it from all over those places, all over the world you might have been watching. Over and out from beautiful, hidden away Oswego, New York, a Genie's happy place on a lakeside.
Beautiful, beautiful.